Part 2, Deepening Connection. In this segment of our transformative journey, we explore the profound realm of emotional intimacy, a key component in enhancing relationships and connection. Emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy is a sacred space where vulnerability, trust, and understanding flourish. It involves opening up, sharing our authentic selves, and creating a safe space for others to do the same. Let's embark on this exploration of emotional intimacy, understanding its significance in cultivating meaningful connection. Understanding emotional intimacy. Now, when it comes to understanding emotional intimacy, it is very important that we understand that not everyone we meet or associate ourselves in our proximity is meant to be in an emotional, intimate relationship with us. We need to learn how to read through the lines and understand and see people for who they are and where they stand in our life, and place them in accordance to who they display themselves to be and not necessarily who they say they are in our life. Now, this discernment comes with practice and experience, of course, and also it's something that I want to teach people to learn how to vet individuals that come in their life in accordance to the energies and the influences and the intentions that they aspire in your life. Just like a job, when they are hiring individuals, they are looking through their resume, and based on the experience they've had, they might get a call back, and then they go through an interview process and might go through several interview processes before they are considered to be qualified to play the position in the corporation. In this case, if we use that same intention and process in our daily life, when we meet individuals and learn how to place them in accordance to whatever position they are interested in, whether that's a partner, a friend, an associate, and so on. We can't simply be opened to just anyone. Not because you can't be authentically yourself, but not everyone should have access or deserve all of you, in the sense that they will be in the emotional intimacy of your essence. So when we learn to understand emotional intimacy more, we understand the why behind that I just displayed. Because just like I was explaining, when you interview for a job and you go through several interview processes and then a decision is made that you get the position, there's still also a probation period where you get to display what your references were that made you qualified for the position. If in that probation period, for example, you lack the ability to stand on what your references was and your qualifications and your experiences, then there a decision can be made so that you can be released from a job based on your lack of performance, right? Because just like any job in corporation and business, what we're looking for is an individual that can fulfill the needs that are necessary for that position. And you can say you have an experience doing something, and you can put it even in a resume, but it is not until the experience of your expertise is had will we truly get to decide if you want to keep you or not. And I think that's a fair process to have even when meeting individuals in our life. Just because we had good rapport with an individual the first time we met them, there was a great first impression, does not mean that we need to be emotionally intimate with them right away. Especially physically intimate, right? Because when we start to learn who we are, what we hold within us, we start to have higher standards and require more for ourselves because we understand the value that we bring and the essence of our energy. And we don't necessarily want to infuse that sacredness with just anyone if we want to truly cultivate the ability to be self-mastered primarily, but also emotionally stable and balanced within ourselves, because we understand that energies can be contagious and they can influence our mind, our thoughts, and our emotions and our feelings, especially if we are empathetic and we can feel and resonate with the energies around us. We don't necessarily want to intertwine and entangle ourselves with just anyone. So this is very important that I bring into that awareness before we go into the emotional intimacy aspect of this segment, because it is not for everyone to be emotionally intimate with just anyone. Make sure you go through your vetting process. Make sure you get to truly know people. Make sure you take their actions before you consider their words for who they are. Remember, a person that is who they are doesn't have to say they are who they are, because their actions will speak the volumes of that very thing. And that's just one point of view that I want to point out. Now, continuing into this next part of understanding emotional intimacy, we have here the essence of emotional intimacy. Discover the core elements of emotional intimacy. Now, what does it mean to truly connect with someone on an emotional level? So when you are truly emotionally intimate with someone, what that feels like first, right, in the first stages, it's not necessarily, oh my God, there's this chemistry and I am so infatuated and I am lustful and I want them. That's infatuation, that's lust, that's your primal state speaking. That is not true emotional intimacy. So don't confuse that for lust and chemistry. It's not that. When you are going into the stages of emotional intimacy, what's happening is you are creating a sense of a rapport with this individual, whether they're a friend or a potential spouse. You are building a bond based on your stories through conversations, finding out what things you guys have in common, what can you resonate and relate with, what intrigues you about them, and vice versa. And the moment of your interactions, you have this sense of resonance, I would say, where it feels like a natural flow of conversation, of body language, of smiles, of pauses, of you go, I go, and there's just natural flow and state, right? That's what it feels like in the beginning. Doesn't mean you're intimate with them yet, but there's a nice and smooth and effortless momentum of the energies that are just flowing effortlessly. There's no force, there's no manipulation, there's no peacocking, there's no I do this and I do that, I got this, and there's no shallowness, right? This is something that we can talk from my worst fear as a child to my aspirations going forward, to what I see myself doing in 5 years, to what is it that I'm truly looking for in a partner, and resonating in those interactions where there's constant rebuttal falling through, that brings that awareness that there is a natural energetic resonance that allows the natural flow of intimacy, even in the most subtle ways. Now, when you reach further in the relationship, let's say 4 years. The level of emotional intimacy, let's say with that very same person, is so profound that you have already shared aspects of you with this person that you have never shared with anyone. And there's this level of trust and knowing that it won't be repeated or it won't be shared with others, right? There's this level of knowing that you almost feel that you know what the person is thinking, and you can end each other's sentences because there is a level of knowing each other to the core, down to the minute behaviors and patterns and vibrations of one another, because you have now at this point, after let's say 4 years, have intertwined and sacredly connected through the union of intercourse, for example, where the connection is so equally yoked that it just falls through, where you don't even have to say anything because they already know, kind of thing, where your body language tells them more than your mouth could, because they can read through the lines of things that you have not said, and because they are intimately connected to you in that way, they will know how to soothe you, they will know how to comfort you, they will know how to approach you, they will know that you might need space, they will know that you need comfort or a hug. They will know you to a degree that words do not have to be spoken, right? That's when you know that you are truly emotionally intimate with a person, because the consistency and the reliability and the level of honesty and authenticity with one another, where you can be fully and truly yourself without feeling judged or criticized, or that you have to belittle yourself or dim yourself to not make them feel uncomfortable. When you reach that level of emotional intimacy with someone, it is considered a very rare and beautiful blessing, because in emotional intimacy at that stage, not only do you get to truly know the individual that you have this bond with, but you get to know more of yourself through the interactions and the person that you become through this experience with them. Because we truly get to know who we are through how we feel, how we behave, how we act, how we are triggered, how we are aroused, the level of passion that comes out of us, the level of rage that comes out of us. There's so much of ourselves that we learn through these bonds and these relationships that cannot be met through the solitude of our own experience with ourselves, right? So this is why when you have the opportunity to feel this level of emotional intimacy, sometimes it can be too intense for some that have never experienced it, or have a distorted perception of what that even is, because they maybe have never even witnessed that in others. Like, let's say you never had an example of what a healthy relationship is in your life, so it might become difficult for you to accept an intense emotional bond that displays so many layers of intimacy that it might scare you away, honestly. So you won't be able to receive it, or even introduce yourself to such a relationship if that's not something that you've ever seen. So it does become easier for individuals that had the example of such intimate relationships and passion in their life, because it's more normalized. So that's also something that we need to highlight, because a lot of people have never even felt that because they haven't, one, allowed themselves to, or they fear getting hurt or getting lost in the intensity of some emotional bonds with others, right? So there's also levels and different degrees of it. So in the example I provided was from the casual beginnings to the intensity of the extreme to what that really looks like, which all of it, it's a beautiful process. I've experienced every level of emotional intimacy and I don't regret not one. Whether it hurt me, whether it was a moment, whether it never even happened, it was enough for me to know what that feels like at the full spectrum of what emotional intimacy is, right? Bringing us into another layer of understanding what emotional intimacy is, which is building blocks of trust, where we explore the role of trust that trust plays in developing emotional intimacy. Now, how can trust be nurtured and sustained in relationships? Now, this is very, this can go many ways. I would say that for the least. Because if there's something that is important, is to have trust in any emotional intimacy, right? You want to trust the person that you're interacting with. You want to be able to share and be vulnerable and be authentic, right? Without feeling judged, without feeling that they're gonna turn on you, betray you, whatever. Even if it happens. But in that moment, you want to feel that you trust them. You want to feel that not only can you trust them, but because you trust them, you can respect them. Because they have showed you maybe characteristics that they are consistent and reliable in their bond and intimacy with you, right? Because they have been consistently there to be an active listener when you're going through something. They have been a reliable source when you're grieving. They have been a dependable person when you need someone to be there for you. Therefore, the bond and the trust that you have for that person is considered more sacred when you're intimate with this emotional intimacy with them. Because now you have this level of respect for them that is crucial in an emotional intimate relationship. Why? Because a person that you can't respect will be a person that will be hard for you to really lean on or rely on, because you're kind of sketchy about who they are as a person. Let's say they have certain flaws. Let's say they're a pathological liar and you caught them in so many lies. Your defenses are now going to go up because why? They have displayed characteristics that you can't trust. And when you can't trust certain characteristics in a person, you don't really have the ability to respect them fully. And for example, as a woman, you want to be with someone, whether they're your friend or your lover, you want to be with someone that you respect. Because let's say a man that you respect is someone that you will trust because you trust their character, because you trust that they're going to lead you in the right direction, because you trust that they have your back, because you trust that they're going to handle the situation and remove the stress away from you instead of adding stress to you, right? When you are with the right man, that is important for a woman. In the case that you are in an intimate relationship with someone, and let's say they cheat on you, whether man or woman, you might be heartbroken and disappointed, right? But you start to realize that you're not even disappointed or heartbroken because of what they did, which is the cheating part, but you're more heartbroken and disappointed because you feel fooled about believing who you thought they were in your life, meaning someone you respected, someone that you thought that would love you enough and respect you enough not to intentionally harm you or hurt you or betray you, because you thought that they valued the relationship, the intimate emotional relationship that you had. So once that happens, what happens is the respect goes out the window, and you're grieving the fact that you can't respect them anymore. And you already know that, wow, and now I can't respect you. And because I can't respect you, it's going to be hard for me to trust you. And because I can't trust you, there's now no point in continuing something that I know will no longer feel the same it used to. Because to be emotionally intimate with a person, it is very, very crucial to have a level of trust with that individual. Because without trust, there's nothing. Without trust, you just have a shallow relationship that is based on necessity, that is based on codependency, that is based on financial gain, that is based on status, that is based on opportunity, right? Because how can true emotional intimacy truly exist in a situation where you now lost respect for the individual because the trust has faded due to the lack of characteristics that are needed for such thing, right? So that is how trust can be nurtured and sustained, is by having the ability to maintain the structure of that level of respect for one another and honesty and consistency in doing that, so that there's no second guessing or doubt, because it has been consistent in the process throughout the course of the bonding and the building of the relationship, that has maintained the building blocks of the trust based on the performance and the behavior of the relationships throughout the process of it, right? And it is very important that we understand here that everyone is going to have a different opinion about what it looks like based on their own experience, based on their own level of perception and their own level of consciousness and traumas and necessities. Because sometimes people can't even see certain truths because they are still tainted through the illusion of their own pain and suffering and necessities and addictions and so on, right? So this is a very subjective matter, and I am only speaking from my own awareness based on my own personal experiences to know that there are certain things that are non-negotiable and certain things that are more lenient. And for me personally, I understand and know that once the trust is gone, there's no point to any relationship, whether it's friendship or a spouse, because I need to always respect the people I associate myself with, because I like to feel proud of the people I am around. And that's just something that I personally require. Which brings me into my next one, cultivating self-emotional intimacy. So how can we do that? So self-reflection practices is one of them, because in this practice we engage in practices that foster emotional intimacy with ourselves. Now, how can we self-reflect and deepen our understanding of our own emotions, right? So that's basically me saying that through my self-reflection, and my ability to be self-aware of myself, I am consciously aware of what channels I am willing to open and what channels will automatically close based on the individual, the level of intimacy, where I place certain people based on the process that I take to get to really know them on a mental, physical, spiritual level, right? Because not everyone is meant to be emotionally intimate. So because I know myself enough to self-reflect, I have become aware of who I am. I also know, based on that, what I need to have that intimacy, not only with myself, but with those around me. So in order for me to have self-reflective practices so that I can become aware of what is it that makes me emotionally intimate with myself, it is a practice of always asking myself the right questions. What does that look like? Let's say I meet someone and we go on a date and I'm having a great time and everything is going fine. And there's a few patterns that I'm picking up based on my experience that I'm highlighting in my subconscious mind. Meaning, I'm not really judging it or criticizing it. It's just a level of awareness that I'm becoming aware of. And because of the pattern, now I'm questioning not only my mental capacity, but I'm going intimately within myself and now being in tune with what is it that I am feeling. Because to be emotionally intimate with yourself, you have to fully embody yourself, meaning you're not only thinking and processing your experience through your mental capacity and through the history of your past experiences, but you are also tuning in with yourself so that you can intimately tune and tap in and turn on to your instinct, your intuition, the connection you gain with your higher self to pick up on whatever signal it is that you need to pick up on that tells you, is this a yes or is this a no? And based on that feeling that unfortunately many of us turn off because we get so glamored by the the status, the cars, the money, the lust, the attraction, and all these things, we forget to go within ourselves and process what is it that I am feeling on a much expanded sense of self. Meaning, what is my spirit picking up from this individual in front of me? Sometimes when that question comes about, you have to learn to turn off the glitz and the glam, the impressions, the influence of the external world, and go truly within yourself so that you can pick up the true essence behind all of this facade and the illusions that are now fabricated to orchestrate this experience, right? Because let's say without all of that seems so impressive in the ego mind, who is this person, this individual, this experience on a spiritual level, right? Because you take all of that away, who are they really, is what I want to know. So when you become emotionally intimate with yourself, where you are completely honest with yourself, where you are completely accepting of yourself, where you are aware of your shadow aspects as well as your higher self, you have the neutrality of your totality intact. And when you have that intact and you are balanced with yourself, your emotional state, your ego mind, as well as your spiritual essence, you're not looking at the individual with judgment or criticizing. You are looking for, where is this individual resonating with my essence? Are they more in my ego experience, or are they more in my spiritual essence? Or will this individual be the perfect balance that I need to remain in the balanced state that I want to maintain? Right? These are questions that it is only when you become emotionally intimate with yourself can you truly penetrate through the veil and discover the answers to that. Which brings me into the next one of embracing vulnerability. Dive into the concept of vulnerability and its connection to self-emotional intimacy. How can being vulnerable with yourself lead to profound self-connection? Well, for one, being completely vulnerable with myself is being completely honest with myself. That means not being in denial of aspects of myself that are pointing me to aspects that I may not be proud of, that I may not want to accept. Let's use the example of the individual that I used before. If in this state, after reflecting and asking myself, where is this individual resonating with me the most, and what is it that I would prefer? Remember, because when you're self-mastered, you are mastered enough to step into whatever experience you want without being tied and bind to it. Some people could only jump into the ego experience because that's all they have the potential to step into, because they have yet to open themselves up to their heart, their mind, and their spirit, right? But when you self-master yourself, you can step into the experience of the ego if you want, or step into the neutrality of both aspects in a balanced state, or you can step into the full abundance of a spiritual experience that you can share with one another, right? Because now you are free and capable enough to navigate through the full spectrum of all layers and levels of consciousness. But anyway, I digress as I bring back the example of this interaction that I'm having, let's say on this first date. In order for me to embrace vulnerability, I have to be honest with myself and ask myself, why am I aligning to this experience? What is this experience resonating with me in? Now, let's say I notice that this individual may have a lack of patience streak for whatever reason, that I noticed that he got slightly frustrated when his order came incorrectly. And instead of saying, no, that's fine, take your time, he's like, really? I said it 3 times. Why wouldn't, I don't get it. And then he gets frustrated, returns his plate, let's say, and then looks at me. He's like, I don't get it. She didn't listen to what I said the first time. So now I'm like, okay, interesting, right? I'm not judging it. I'm not criticizing it. Maybe before I would have thought, that's kind of rude of him, right? Because that's our natural impulse to blame and claim and say that someone else is something else that we are not, right? That's easy for us to do. But now the question here is, why am I resonating and aligning with someone that does that, right? That is me embracing my vulnerability and being honest with myself. Because now I get to go a little deeper. Have I ever been that person? Right? And maybe you have not been that person, let's say in a restaurant, but have you been that person with someone that you're more familiar with, like a family member or a spouse or a teacher or so on? Have you been that person? Now, embracing my vulnerability and being truly emotionally intimate with myself, I am accepting and being honest and authentic with myself, which means that if I remember that, yes, indeed, there has been a time that I've been like that, I now could reflect and say to myself, interesting, now I get to see what that attitude looks like from the outside. And I did not like the way that looked or the way that was experienced. So now from that experience, from looking at that from the point of view of someone looking from the point of view of outside in, as myself looking at myself let's say, from that experience, even though it wasn't me doing it, but I saw how I too have been that person in the past, I can now take this opportunity to be honest with myself as I reflect on the level of awareness and the wisdom that I have gained from this one interaction that has allowed me to become aware that that is something that I no longer want to do or ever be again, because I have now experienced what that is from this experience, and I have now accepted that that's no longer who I want to be. So it brought me into the awareness of something new only because I was able to embrace that vulnerability and be completely honest without denying aspects of myself. And that doesn't mean that that's something that I had to be spoken out to the person, but it is something that I became aware of within myself, because life happens for us and not to us. So every opportunity, every experience brings us the chance to reflect on things like that, if we take it, of course. Now, bringing us into nurturing emotional intimacy in relationships. Now, how can we do that? The first way would be communication as a gateway. Explore the role of communication in nurturing emotional intimacy. What communication practices facilitate deeper connection? Well, for one, when we learn to take accountability and be honest with ourselves and others, and we don't live on the ego and the pride, and we actually open our heart to the possibility to be balanced, to communicate with others, to maintain an emotional intimacy and that bond solid, communication like apologizing or showing appreciation or rebutting and letting them know that we heard them, or even noting that maybe they said, oh, I like this pink thing that I saw here, and you take note of it, and you don't have to necessarily say anything. Well, let's say you gift it to them on the next time you see them. They'll feel heard. They'll feel like you're always listening, so that emotional intimacy and bond remains solid, right? Because you are taking the initiative to reinforce the energy of love, to maintain emotional intimacy, where you are making them feel heard, making them feel understood, making them feel seen, making them feel that you're open to all that they are, while understanding that there's still more aspects of them that you have yet to discover, while being okay with that, right? It's this level of, I accept you for the aspects of you that I now know and I have yet to discover, but whatever comes, the energy of love is the bond that maintains this emotional intimacy between us, that makes sure that it's solidified throughout time, right? Which brings us into the next one, active listening techniques. Learn and practice active listening techniques. How can being fully present in conversation enhance emotional intimacy? Just like the example I just provided you, where you were present in the conversation, where you heard the comment, the subtle comment that they said that they liked this one thing, and even though you didn't have to repeat it at that moment, you validated that you were present in the conversation by then introducing that as a gift on the next interaction or the next time you decided to give them something. So that's a way of active listening, to give one example. Now, how do you overcome barriers to emotional intimacy? Well, first we want to identify and address our fears. Examine common fears that hinder emotional intimacy. How can acknowledging and addressing these fears pave the way for deeper connections? Well, for one, let's say that you're scared of emotional intimacy because you never felt it before, because you never seen the example of what that actually looks like. And you have this weird negative perspective of it, thinking that if I go too deep into this connection or into this emotional intimacy, I might lose myself in it. Now, the first thing we want to do is ask ourselves the right questions as we self-reflect, to acknowledge and address why these fears are even there. What was the origin of that fear to even exist within me that is now hindering my ability and capability to truly be emotionally intimacy with someone that maybe I see great potential for? But because of this fear of getting hurt, of losing myself and the intensity of it, of maybe feeling that if I lose myself in it, I won't have what it takes to restore myself, right? These are all these stories that we tell ourselves because we allow fear, the energy of fear, to take over, which keeps us then trapped in the paradigm of ego because we have yet to open our heart truly and fully so that we can be okay with being intimate. So that if in the worst case scenario that we fear, we know that we are solid and more than capable enough to overcome whatever challenges and obstacles and adaptability comes about with life in itself, because life is a course that gives us trials and errors and ups and downs, but that is what makes life the beautiful orchestration of the present moment that it is. So for us to not live life fully because of fear, we are only missing out on so much abundance of what it is to live and be one with life, because we lack our ability to step into the energy of love. So that is very important. We want to address, we want to acknowledge these fears so that we can pave the way to a deeper connection after overcoming these within ourselves. And another way to identify and address these fears, maybe with someone that you are already connecting with, is being honest and authentic about these things. Because if it's genuine, if it's a true connection, the natural state of understanding and reasoning and having compassion and empathy will always be there. If it's love, for real, if it's real, genuine love. If it's not, if it's shallow, if it's opportunistic, if it's to be used and abused and instant gratification, if it's narcissistic, if it's codependency, it's always going to be conditional. It's always going to be you're wrong, I'm right, all of that chaos. And there you want to actually question if you want to actually be emotionally intimate with anyone. And that's reasonable. To each his own. Like I said, this is a very subjective matter based on everyone's own personal experience and beliefs and ability and capability of stepping fully into that emotional intimacy with themselves and others. So I can only speak from my own personal experience, through my own practices that I've done in the past, that has allowed me to experience the full spectrum of what emotional intimacy is. And like I said, I've been through trials and errors and ups and downs and betrayals and lies and cheat and all of that and above. And I don't regret not one thing. Why? Because besides the hurt and the pain that was present maybe in those final stages, the abundance of love that I got to experience, the abundance of experience and intimacy and passion, all of that could have never happened had I not been able to step into that emotional intimacy. So when you learn to balance the scales of those pros and cons, all of it actually becomes worth it, because to not have it seems way more tragic to me than to have it and lose it. But to not have it at all, I don't even know how people live like that. How do you even know what life is without the abundance of that experience in your life, right? So, like I said, this is only my personal experience. I can only speak for myself, but it is more than worth it once truly experienced, right? Bringing us into another way to overcome barriers in emotional intimacy is cultivating emotional resilience, which is what I kind of just explained. By exploring strategies for building emotional resilience in the face of challenges, how can emotional resilience contribute to sustained emotional intimacy? Like I said, life is not going to always be flowers and perfection and happiness and joy. It is because we experience the complete opposite of that we truly learn to embrace and experience happiness and joy. You see, it is through the duality of the contrast of all that is life that when we step into those moments where we truly feel passion, where we feel intimacy, where we feel happy, where we feel joy and connection and bond and a sacred true connection, that we learn to appreciate it, because maybe we've experienced the complete opposite of all that is not that, and it all starts to feel so dim and shallow and not even worth having, because we start to see through the facades and the veils that it is not even real. It's not something that I would even consider pursuing long term, because it is not what is truth. It is not what is true intimacy, right? So when we cultivate emotional resilience, what we're saying is we are willing to risk the potential of heartache and heartbreak from the loss of something that when we had it was so valuable and so beautiful that we won't regret ever having it. Instead, we would embrace the memories of it. We will embrace the wisdom that came from it, and we would enjoy the experience that allowed us to embody levels of emotional states that, had we not had those experiences, we would never even discovered. Bringing us into the conclusion. As we conclude part 2, you're equipped with insights and tools to navigate the intricate landscape of emotional intimacy. This journey is a continuous exploration, a dance of vulnerability and trust that transforms relationships into profound connections. Remember, the art of emotional intimacy is a gift you give yourself and others, fostering a tapestry of meaningful and fulfilling connection.